Good day, fellow deal makers. Welcome to the Deal Scout. On today's show, we're going to have a conversation with my friend Spencer, who's on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast, and we're going to talk about all sorts of fun things, real estate and life and family. Spencer, welcome to the show.
Josh, wonderful way to start the day. I know it's middle of the day for you, start of the day for me. Really honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So Spencer, you and I are hanging out in a bar or a coffee shop, depending on what time of the day it is, and someone comes in. They go, "Hey, Spencer, who are you? What do you do?" Right? The 50,000 foot view. Why don't you give it a go?
Happy to. Yeah, so I'm based out here in the Bay Area, California. I'm very proud dad of two young kids and husband of Jennifer Morimoto, who is the co-founder and COO of Madison Investing, along with me. So I lead Madison Investing. It's an investing group. We help folks jump into apartment deals, syndications, private funds, in and beyond real estate. And so that is the now. Grew up in a real estate household as well. I used to be embarrassed to talk about that, Josh. I've been encouraged to bring that up proactively. My dad was a broker in residential real estate for 30 years. Made me work in that thing for as young as 6, all the way up to teenage years. That's what scared me into technology companies for 13 years. So I found myself, growing and scaling 5 software companies over the course of 13 years, and eventually left that all behind just before COVID. Quit the W-2 world to run our investing company full time, because it just demanded my full attention. And frankly, it's a lot of fun helping people solve the stuff that we solve with them. So that's a bit of the now. And I used to play in a bunch of punk and metal bands, as you and I joked about the other day. So there are some tattoos hiding underneath the collared shirt.
Yeah, so cool. What instrument did you play?
I still play guitar. I don't perform on a stage or anything anymore. It's mostly just for our kids and playing, wheels on the bus.
Yeah. So punk and metal. So give us an idea. How old are you?
38.
Okay. So this was like MXPX and like, is that the kind of punk stuff that you were playing back in the day?
I love that reference.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like the high school era. Then, typically it starts off with that's the fun punk stuff, and then it gets a little bit crazier over time. But yeah, that was definitely in the mix.
Awesome. Awesome. So what you guys are doing now, you said you left the W-2 world, you grew up in a real estate house, built and scaled 5 tech companies, and you left the W-2 world to build Madison. But before we go into Madison, let's go backwards, right? You said you mentioned something. You were kind of embarrassed about, growing up in a real estate house. Like, why so? Like, what made you say that?
Yeah, I guess it comes from growing up in an area of the country, which most people know, if you're not from the Bay Area, like that whole Silicon Valley thing, it's ever present. When you grow up around here, there's billboards everywhere about tech companies. Like every person, in some way has either a family member or they themselves or a friend, a direct connection into tech companies,
Mhm.
and some early stage, some late stage. And so when you're growing up, and I'm a teenager, for example, and I was sitting there doing open houses for my dad on the weekend, or just doing cleaning out a fridge at a property that he was trying to sell at some point, doing that real property manager type stuff. Not quite as cool as talking to your friend who is doing like this incredible internship, or folks who are about to go like build something in their garage and they're like literally in high school coding in a product already. And I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't clean out a fridge. So by most people's standards, they'd probably say, well, that's a stupid reason to be embarrassed. And in hindsight, yeah, absolutely. Because the thing that is full circle for me, Josh, is man, do I wish I had gotten into at least the world of real estate investing earlier. And my W-2 career, we were doing fine on the income, very proud of that track and how we've been able to set up our family. That said, we were doing the traditional 401k thing, an index fund thing, all the rest. And I wish that I had kind of gotten the bug earlier and as an adult, so but that's the long story short as to why I was a bit embarrassed. It's just, it's not the thing, at least in the local culture and community.
Yeah, I totally get it. Especially when you're in high school, there's a part of your identity gets wrapped up. And even as a grown man, like I struggle with this. I got it tattooed on my arm. Who am I, right? So we get our identities wrapped up in the kind of deals we do, the kind of jobs we have, and such like that. So, nah, man, I get it. I think it's a growth thing for guys for people, for deal makers to kind of find their fit. How did you know after, scaling and working in the tech industry and building 5 of them, how did you know that that wasn't your fit anymore and it's time to leave the W2 behind?
You know, I'll frame it this way. Coaching, mentoring, and just growth of other people has been a key focus in my life. And one of the conversations that I appreciated from a mentor when they framed it this way to me, I have tried to help other folks with when they've been faced with the same decision, which is big decisions have a push and a pull. I really believe that. Like every single decision in life, small, big, or otherwise. And in my career, there was definitely a push, and the push is the thing you want to get away from. There was, this is a couple companies back, very brief story. Our first son, older one, he was an infant. I was working for probably the closest thing to quote unquote rocket ship tech company, fintech unicorn you've ever heard of. And I was working 80 hours a week in an office. And that's not exaggerated. I mean, that's in office work. I was still doing stuff when I got home. I was not seeing my son for weeks at a time. And there was a particular sprint where I was grinding so hard, I feel like I didn't see him for at least a week, and that's hard for me. And maybe that's natural for some out there. No judgments placed on you guys if that's your jam. I do want to be involved in my kid's life. So that was hard. That was a hard push. In hindsight, it is worth mentioning, I did choose to go to that company deliberately, took a 40% pay cut to do it because that was the fastest learning year I've ever had in my career. It was worth it in that sense, but that was not sustainable, Josh. I mean, that is a very aggressive work schedule. So that was the push. I think the grind was done, and there's no off ramp. I mean, I was working the same plan that a lot of people in Silicon Valley do, and they're still banking on it. I'd say thousands of people are, which is go join an early stage tech company, bank on the equity that you're going to get, A series, B series, maybe even seed, depending how early and adventurous you want to get in these tech company stages for funding. And then hope they have a huge exit like Uber or Google. So I was banking on that. That was the push. The pull, quite different. I would say that I actually got a really unique opportunity brought in by a mentor to a company called Lending Home. They've rebranded since, now they're called Kiavi, but they're biggest hard money lender in the country. So I was brought in to kind of scale their loan origination groups. We ended up doing $4 billion in hard money loans, 600 loans a month by the time I left. And when I got there, though, I started to kind of notice all the zeros behind these transactions on these fix and flips. I can swing a hammer. I cannot be handy at all. I am not ashamed to say that. My wife and better half is far handier than I am, and I'm very secure in saying that out loud. But it's important because that informed me to know I'm not going to become a flipper, despite these numbers I'm seeing inside being in the guts of a fix and flip hard money lender. That's also a crowdfunding platform at the time. I was like, these guys are onto something. Like maybe I'm on the wrong side of these transactions. Maybe I should go give real estate another look. And we at that point started, I started just obsessing. I read 24 books over the course of 18 months. I listened to 400 plus podcasts. It was an obsession, man. And that's helpful for an entrepreneur, as you can attest to. I know you and I talked previously, Josh, about starting businesses is something that, like, once you kind of get bit the bug with, then you just keep going. But for me, that was overkill. But I did find a fit eventually where it was like, fix and flip, not for me. I want predictability a bit more, something that will help me set up income streams. So we started putting our own money into passive stuff, what we perceived as passive. Bought a rental locally. We were afraid of buying sight unseen. We didn't want to do the turnkey thing long distance. We didn't want to do a syndication private fund thing yet. We weren't ready for that. Bought the duplex locally, overpaid for it, got an okay cash flow, still have it now. Eventually bought some turnkeys in the Midwest once we realized our dollar could go further.
All right, guys. For some reason, I lost internet. Totally my bad. But one of the questions I asked is, and we were talking about leaving the W-2, and Spencer was saying that there's a push and a pull. And when he was talking about the pull, we got disconnected. So Spencer, back to you, the pull.
Yeah. And so the pull is key, and the timing was strange for me. I think It happened in three phases, really. For us, I was at Lending Home. I was fortunate enough to be brought into that company. That was the last W-2 gig that I had out of 5 fintech companies in a row. Biggest hard money lender in the country. They've since rebranded into Kiavi, I believe. But we were doing $4 billion in loan origination and fix and flip loans. By the time I left, 600 loans a month. That was a boot camp of learning. And also it was eye-opening. And I got the bug for real estate investing specifically from that experience because I saw the zeros involved in the transactions from the inside. And I was sitting there going like, man, these fix and flippers, I can't swing a hammer, and I don't think it aligns to our goals and strategy. Thankfully, Jennifer is the handy one in our household, and I have YouTube if I need to, but I'm not going to become a flipper because it wasn't a fit for our strategy. Great strategy if it matches your circumstances and your skills. For us, didn't match, but it was enough for me to light the spark, right? So I got obsessed. I started reading, devouring content. I read 24 books in 18 months, listened to 400 plus podcasts. It was over the top. I'm more of an early bird when I have to than a night owl. I was waking up for 2 hours, starting at 4 a.m. up to 6 a.m. before I did my day job and dad responsibilities, just to go do that content devouring and start signing up for coaching programs. It was the works, Josh. And we went through these three phases where I wasn't going to become full active. I wasn't going to even get active in any way. We just wanted to put some money into passive income streams, or what we perceived them to be. Mm-hmm. First one, local rental. We went and bought a local duplex. We still have it now. Thankfully, it's appreciated. We're going to try to refi it pretty soon too. That's the benefit of California real estate. Can't cash flow a lot of times, but at least you can appreciate. $430,000 for $200 a month in cash flow is the opposite of a home run. So that is a good cash flow goal setting learning.
Yeah.
So we then were like, better mileage for our dollar if we take that to other places. So we bought, a series of turnkeys over time, got up to 5 turnkeys in Kansas City. Very pleased with the performance on those. So we had built up this little portfolio. Eventually we got to 7 residential properties, and Kansas City ones were $60K per, cash flowing $250 a month. Pretty different economics, and we were like, wow, cash flow is awesome, but way more headache than expected. I mean, you don't bake in turnover costs. Not everyone sticks around. If you go into C-class properties, turnover is really high. Everyone leaves once a year. All these things, and we still had to manage the property managers. And that's not simple. That's why I think of rentals as occasionally semi-passive. I'm all about rentals. This is not a myopic, like, good, bad thing. It just wasn't the fit for where we're at in life right now, because we are so busy with kids and we're busy with life responsibilities. So that was phase 2, as I think of it. Phase 3, we looked beyond single family, and I got the bug on bigger properties, on seeing the reasoning why people get into apartment deals, big apartment deals too, not 20, 50, 70 units. I mean, we've been investing in 150 plus units. So 150 plus properties. And so we started doing that. We invested as limited partners in syndication deals, and very pleased with how that started to go. And ultimately, just via networking like a madman on nights and weekends, going on Bigger Pockets, all the online forums you can imagine, somehow found myself interested enough to go, and I was getting questions from people in my network saying, what are you investing in? And eventually that led to, maybe we should build an investing group around this. And so here we are, and now I run Madison Investing full time. That took years though. That took a course of about 3.5 years of what started as a hobby. Didn't plan on this being my full-time passion and business now, but wake up every day and help people from all corners of the country, basically try to de-risk as much of these types of investments as possible, because I believe in them. I mean, it's like literally baked into our wealth plan for our family. So, so that was the pull. The pull was like, it has to be mentioned too, by the way, Josh, I think I kind of breezed over this earlier. Went through a really challenging time in my dad's business when I was a kid. And so I watched his business. For our family, we had one income. We had his income, active broker income. And that thing crumbled. His income crumbled. His company kind of imploded for a time. Our life shrunk down because my younger brother passed away from cancer. My parents got divorced, and I won't go TMI more than people really want to hear, and for the sake of the lesson. But we call that the dark decade, and it was really painful. And I watched what happens when we had to downsize and change our whole lives around that. So as a dad myself, having to watch all that go down and experience that with my family, I apply those lessons and think about the pull, and I think about like all these different ways that I want to insulate my family from the possibility of if I get hit by a bus, and if Jennifer and or I can't be here for our kids, like what are the income streams and ways that we are growing our wealth to build this moat around our family and our household. And so that was the pull, because I could not continue doing a grind of 80 hours a week in an office, let alone dumping money into a 401k is something that I think is a perfectly fine strategy for the vast majority of people. But I planned on using that money for the next 30 years, not leaving it somewhere with someone else for them to drop fees on it, and me maybe use it later when I'm presumably poorer in retirement, which is what they try to tell you. And so that is the game plan for us now, is just try to think about how to be present now, financially sound now. And that was a long-winded answer to your question about the poll.
Yeah. Wow. I think, we've interviewed probably 800 entrepreneurs across our different brands and podcast shows. And when I talk to a entrepreneur investor, I hear common themes, right? Like there was some type of major pain event or
Mm,
something like that that they've pushed through, and now it creates a massive solution on the other side.
mm.
So let me say that, I am so sorry for the loss of your brother and through the
Oh,
the dark decade that you went through. That is terrible.
thank
Um,
you.
some of the things that you've learned and that pain has driven you to create a moat around your family, protect them, like study financially, may not have ever come if you didn't go through that dark decade, seeing your dad's business collapse and all these things happen. Um, so
True.
I, what's that?
I said true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that was a that was a dark decade, but I think it's driven you to create some amazing things for yourself and your family, and then for other investors. What have what have you taken from that scenario that you then teach to other investors through Madison, like
Mm.
to help protect them from that?
This is like my favorite topic, so I'll try not to get too long-winded. And thank you for the kind words. It was a long time ago, but I think financial offense is what comes to mind. I think financial offense and financial defense, as it's pretty funny coming from a guy who's not exactly a big sports enthusiast, but I think those are the best words I can put to the way we approach this stuff in our own family. And we put our money where our mouth is. I mean, we truly walk the walk on this stuff. Like literally, we commit to our folks in our group, our investors in our group, fellow investors, that anyone that they're going to see from us, we've put our own money in with first. And that's a fact. So, we are putting our own capital at risk because also we believe in these investments. And so I think the key lessons around financial offense, like what does that really mean? Like what that means is that income levels, no matter how high they are, do not directly correlate to the amount of wealth that people are building. And I think that is a very big confusion point for people that are out there. I mean, it's remarkable, like I was very proud of, the careers that Jennifer and I built independently. We had two strong independent tracks in our careers. Her very different industry. She's in consumer packaged goods. I was over in software and tech companies and stuff. And we would look at our W-2s and say, wow, we did great this year, working up, climbing the ladder, getting promotions, et cetera. But that did not track and closely with the building of net worth. We did not see that needle moving. And so I think that is one of the key lessons for people to just like at least start wrapping their mind around, particularly if they're like highly paid professionals of any type. We're talking ranging from a VP, CRO, chief revenue officer of a tech company, all the way over to a third generation entrepreneur, whether it's like a person who's a physician, anyone across the spectrum. Take a look at the net worth number and track that, and just keep in mind that income does not correlate to that. I mean, you got to figure out a way to grow your net worth over time. And playing financial offense also means get specific and clear about why you're investing and what you're investing in. And Like for me, like this is such a simple sounding concept. And this is, I'm sure there's plenty of people way smarter than me out there that got this years ago. And they're going to hear me say it and go like, well, duh. But for me, like sitting there and acknowledging the fact that when you invest in something, are you doing it for cash flow? Are you doing it for growth? And maybe a blend of the both. If you're going to go and pick out what you're going to put 25K, 50K, 100K, maybe a much larger number into of any type of investment, any type of wealth building, ask yourself, like, am I doing this because I'm trying to blah? Am I trying to hit a monthly income number? Because that's what did it for us, Josh. I mean, we basically sat down together, Jennifer and I, this is years ago now, and we had the most awkward weekend ever, which was the most productive thing ever. We literally sat down and spent a whole weekend in a very businessy, very candid fashion as a couple, never tried this before. And we said, what is the monthly income number we want to get to from all sources by X year? And I'm saying X as a variable because we didn't know what timetable to set the goal on. So we started with 15 years, way far out. Mm-hmm. And we were like, well, that's far enough out to allow us to not use excuses. Because, you know, if someone says, oh, I'm going to be wealthy and rich in a year, and it's like, of course, well, that's pretty tight timetable, man. You're giving yourself a very easy excuse to just throw in the towel. So let's take away that time compression, that time excuse. 15 years, let's go do that together. And they were like, hey, that's too long. So let's chop it down to 7. So we actually walked out of that room that one weekend a few years ago, and we said, 7 years, let's see if we can get our active income from our current jobs and sources to increase, but also how do we start building up passive income over time? And that first exercise, I would say, is so darn critical because it's tangible. And if you know the number that you have in your mind, it makes this whole notion that people read about on blogs and hear on podcasts and reading books about financial freedom, financial independence. It's a very abstract idea. Make it not abstract, make it real, make it tangible. And that's what we did. And we worked backward from that number. So, you know, that was a long-winded, very detailed answer, I would say, of what I encourage people to do is, like, if they haven't done that, just do that. And then it'll force you to get more clear as to what you're trying to do to achieve that outcome. And you might be dropping money into something that has very, very little relationship to achieving that goal. You might not care about your monthly income number. You might not care about changing that. A doctor doesn't necessarily plan on walking away from a highly paid career that they've spent years in school for and hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans just to get to in their career. So maybe it's not income for them. Maybe it's growth. Maybe it's tax benefits. Maybe it's all these other things, but I digress. So
I could tell you're excited about this, that you're passionate about this. You mentioned financial offense, right? So being on the offense, like what goals are we going after? Growth, cash flow, right? So creating a plan and making it more concrete. What do you want to be? I want to be wealthy, independently wealthy. Okay, like here's what's the goal for that? Put a number to it. What do you mean by financial defense?
Yeah, you know, I think it goes without saying, you have to still think about what you spend money on. I am not a believer in. I have a ton of respect for the FIRE movement. For people that are familiar with the FIRE movement, you know, financially independent, retire early. At the core of that movement, it is all about like deep frugality. I'm going to misquote it. I'm not a deep subscriber for that movement, but I'll just say that, like, it's cool to see people getting that lean and saying, let's really shrink down our expenses so much so that it's a low overhead lifestyle, if you want to call it that. They don't have much to spend money on. They don't need to. They trim things down. I don't subscribe to that. You got things like the Fat Fire movement, people that are a little more open to spending more money. I think you do have to be aware and frugal where possible. Example, make it tangible for folks. You know, I like a nice car like anyone else, but we drove used cars for years, right? I mean, we finally bought a new car just a few months ago after 10 years of driving 2 used ones. So you got to say, be thoughtful of where you spend your money before you go drop your money thousands of dollars on something that's a consumer good. Just think about, can I use this money to make more money? That's first. The bigger comment, though, I would say, and this is a little bit of like a long game play, but it is the single highest lever I would encourage anyone just to give another thought to if they don't creatively structure their income, is what is the tax efficiency and how heavily taxed are you based on your income streams? You know, I was a heavily bonused, for example, a heavily bonused professional, meaning like when I was leading operations groups for a time and sales groups, particularly sales professionals. I mean, I was a leader for sales groups for a long time. That is some of the most heavily taxed stuff out there. And if you're not building other income streams that have more favorable tax treatment, you're giving away a lot of money. I mean, like paying taxes is an essential part of being in modern society. I believe everyone should be paying what they're legally obligated to pay, of course. But if you are being heavily taxed, you're only doing that on W-2 income. You're not getting investment income. You're not doing other stuff like that. Those are the things that we looked at. And I think that defense is key when it comes to having an awareness and education about that stuff. If you think taxes is dry, I hear you. I mean, I literally worked at the company Intuit that makes TurboTax for the first 5 years. That was my first big company experience. Awesome experience working there. But I didn't think it was fun to talk about taxes. And none of this is tax advice. I'm not a tax professional. Please don't take this as tax advice. This is just me sharing my journey, but for anyone listening. But that's much more important than you may realize. If you think taxes are dry, go ask a very wealthy person how boring you think taxes are. You'll be surprised how interesting that they find taxes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so cool. Why Madison Investing, right? Where did you guys come up with the name for that? Because that's
It's
not your
so
last name or your wife's name. Like,
No, it's quite basic though. So we have had the same first home for living here coming up on 10 years. It's on Madison Street. So we're on Madison Street. I'm sitting there right now. Actually, I'm not over at our office space. It's where we built our family. It's where we built our life together. And since we are a spouse leadership team for Madison Investing, we do have a team that backs us up, of course. But as the leadership team, this is where we were able to also use our home equity over a number of ways and years ago to help build the initial foundation for our business. So that's the origin story. There's not much to it besides that.
yeah, very cool. Now, I have a business partner. I have a few, and I love those guys. But my wife, I don't know if I could be a spouse leadership business partner with the wife, even though we're partners in everything, right? How is it working with a spouse, raising a fund, and doing some really cool stuff?
It's not for everybody. I'll say that right up front. I
Yeah.
think for some folks who tell friends, family, colleagues, and beyond our setup, and they're like, "Oh, absolutely not." They're like, "There's no way, never." So it works for us, but it wasn't just something that we woke up one day and thought, "Oh, we got it all dialed in." Are there debates, aka the business way of saying arguments? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, frankly, that's kind of the mark of a good leadership team outside of just a family. If you're in business, if everyone always gets along all the time and they have the exact same opinion, that's actually not a really well-configured leadership team. You want people with strong opinions.
Mhm.
Here's the key difference. And what I believe, and I'll speak for Jennifer enough on this one. We both had 13-year careers, very different ones, completely siloed from each other.
Mhm.
And she went off on her own leadership track in marketing, e-commerce, and beyond. I had mine in operations, sales leadership, business development, scaling. So we knew the language of business. And that is so helpful. When you can sit there and ground the discussion, I'm even using a bunch of corporate platitudes. I just can't turn off that part of my brain, Josh. But I try to slap the corporate out of me, but it never quite leaves. You're speaking a common language. So if you're able to look at performance as objectively as possible, then you can switch that context a little bit more into your business mode, as opposed to, hey, it's the end of the day, the kids just went to bed. You want to wind down and catch up over a glass of wine, maybe watch Netflix. And inevitably, of course, we still have those moments where we forget what context that we're in, or I get too excited about a new opportunity that we want to go show to our investing group. And, one of us is not really ready for that.
Yeah.
So it's been a labor of love. And I think that it's also a deep strategic advantage. I think that people don't realize how quickly and how heavy some of those decisions can be made in our household and for our business, because we're able to sit there together and say, oh, do we have a P&L for the business? Yes, we do. Profit and loss. Do we have all the economics and financials mapped out just like a business would? Yes, we do. Do we have one that ladders into our personal and also treat our personal life the same way now? Yes, we do. And that is something that never would have happened. It's almost unlocking like a superpower as a family and as a household, is being able to say, it's helpful on the finances to manage that part of your family's life like a business. And it doesn't mean it's cold and calculating. It doesn't mean we walk around with our kids acting like they're employees, even though at some point that probably will happen.
Yeah.
When they're ours are still pretty young, and there's good tax reasons for doing that. But you get the idea. It's a key strategic advantage because you can make decisions that are very important very quickly with a deep trust level.
When you were talking about your spouse, Jennifer, right?
Yep.
Okay. You looked over. Is she in the room?
No, but she's in the same house, and we walk out of the same house sometimes, and she could probably hear me. So
Okay. Well, I'm going to give you an opportunity to get some brownie points. Like say something like really awesome about your business partner, right? So say it loud so she could kind of hear it. But this is your chance to get some brownie points.
oh, Jennifer is just such an amazing strategic thinker and really puts together the most creative business plans that unlock our growth to new heights. So yeah.
Yeah, that was perfect. Good. She, she's gonna watch this and she's gonna send me a nasty email.
I know she's definitely going to get a message in a few minutes or a text, but yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. So, Spencer, as you're building this, like, what are some of the milestones that you guys have hit? So, you went from personal investing, right? Your first duplex, then you got into some, out of area investing, right? So, you had to learn how to do some distant property management, and work in those teams, and then, talk to us about some of the evolutions, other milestones that you guys have hit.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest milestones for me, and this sounds like a smaller human moment, um, but it's so powerful, is when you get referrals. So first, you get your first wave of referrals. Our number one growth source for our business is investors referring other investors. Every business is different. There's different ways to win, endless different ways for a business to grow.
Hmm.
For us, we take a more boutique approach, and that just means that maybe at some point we'll do things like paid advertising. We have just chosen not to do that yet. So that first referral that we got a while back, that was magical because that tells you validating point that it's just fundamental is the person that we are working with finds enough value in what we're doing to tell someone else about it. And so then, but the real milestone that made my day is when you get the referral of a referral. That's freaking cool. And now we've got the third layer. The third layer just came in the last year or so, so we got the referral of the referral of the referral, and on it goes, and promise I won't go to like more layers than that. But that's a powerful moment, because everything that we do is informed by our investors and what we do for them and with them. And I love it. I love when people are feeling like we're helping them achieve their goals. And sometimes we'll get those wonderful notes and cards back from people. In this last quarter in particular, we had 4 exits from deals that kicked off in recent years because the market is so incredibly strong. And so it's been a nice little spike in those happy moments from happy people who are hitting their goals in life. And that's just a wonderful thing.
What kind of deals do you guys look for? And let me back up. When did you decide to do, from your own personal money and syndicating deals, putting deals together, but kind of with yourself to go, you know what?
Mhm.
Maybe we should work with other investors, raise a fund, do a syndicate, whatever. Like, what was
Mhm.
that transition like? Or evolution, I should say.
Yeah. I wish I could say there was some kind of clear cut, thoroughly planned master plan all sketched out on a whiteboard. It was very organic at first, which is the very nice way of basically saying figuring it out as you go. So this is around late 2017. We were already deep into all the investing stuff we talked about earlier passively, and it just worked out that I had signed up for a couple of kind of small scale online and kind of Zoom based kind of coaching program stuff and going to meetups, been networking like crazy, talking to people, and ultimately connected with a person based out of Texas who was working on an apartment deal and was willing to let us contribute, and join. I was allowed to join their GP team and start doing stuff and learning. And it was not exactly a big financial outcome for me, but the point was that it was just getting and going and believing that, oh, I can do this. It's not, if I can do all this crazy stuff, which in hindsight was actually pretty challenging in my W-2 career. There was a lot of stuff that I look back on. I'm like, how the heck did I pull that off? And if I can do that, then I can I'm going to do this. So that's how it started. It was like on just letting someone take a chance on me. And also eventually realizing more and more that it's like, it's not rocket science to build processes, build frameworks. And those are things in tech that I've picked up a ton of knowledge and skills around. It's applying it and taking that time to slow down at first and go, it's a platitude. Well, I couldn't qualify before I throw out a platitude, but like, go slow to go fast. You hear that all the time in tech companies, and it's absolutely true in reality, which is learning, for example, how to go and underwrite deals that are big apartment deals, value add plans and stuff. Those is not that different compared to doing the analysis on like a fix and flip, or like a rental investment burr or something. I just had to go through that learning process and invest deeply in that stuff to do it. And so it was just like skill building, do that first. Next step, go network, get pulled into a deal or two by people that are already deep into the business, willing to take a chance on me. As that ramped up over time, realized, oh, maybe I don't want this to just be a hobby, like a side business that I do occasionally. This is so much fun. And this is actually really meeting a need for people in such a way that I could see myself doing this a lot more. So ultimately, there was a point where to cross the, let's stop making this a hobby. Let's literally leave behind the career. And I turned down 3 promotions during that period of time, because I needed to make sure I capped my hours at 40 hours a week, so I could start doing on stuff on nights and weekends and in the early mornings along the way.
Yeah. What time do you wake up now typically? Because before you were going from 4 to 6, studying 2 hours, consuming 28 books in 18 months, or however many books, right? Like, what time do you typically wake up now?
Yeah, that was crazy. I've tried to recreate that. I would say when I'm motivated and in a push of any type, which is relatively frequently, but I'd say that I'll still do a 5 a.m. I ain't doing forwards anymore. But I'd say most days it's a 5:45 or 6.
Yeah.
But sometimes 5. What about you?
Um, it depends. We just got a new puppy, so I have a 8-year-old daughter, 4-year-old son, 2-year-old daughter, and brand new puppy. So I'm not sleeping that much because I'm constantly taking the puppy outside. So this morning was like 7 a.m. But typically, like my normal alarm clock, like in my internal brain, somewhere in the neighborhood of 5:30 to 6. That's comfortable for me. I'd like to. I need to get more discipline. I'm just getting a little bit of old dad, grumpy dad. But I'd like to get back to like 5 a.m. work out, quiet time, pray, read, study, get into the jam. But maybe wait till the puppy's a little bit older.
Oh man, I hear the puppy thing is actually pretty challenging on the timing for sure.
Uh huh. Uh huh. I just hearing myself, I just became my own dad. Like I just became the old man that I used to go, "Come on, dad, stop making freaking excuses." Right?
It's
Yeah.
funny. Yeah, I mean, I know we went over this earlier, but brief comment about wake up time and entrepreneurship. I used to be deeply confused about watching my dad wake up and he got up at 4:30, and I wouldn't like just be awake. I mean, I was a kid and then teenager and beyond, but I knew he would always be waking up at a ridiculously early time. And and I would be like, why would I ever do that? I'm never going to do that. I don't understand. Why would he do that? He looks so unhappy waking up that time of day. I'm like, well, anyone waking up that early, I don't know who has that much pep in their step at 4:30 or 4 in the morning, but there I was waking up at 4, yeah. So there is an element of that where we do become very much our parents.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about your wife's superpower of being able to pull these creative plans and strategic ideas and concepts together. What's your superpower into the business spousal leadership team?
Yeah, well, I'll try to say this in humble ways. I do think that there is an element of authentic relationships and just incredibly good active listening. I mean, I'll say that in a business context. I'm sure Jennifer might disagree on the listening, but in a business context, I think that is a hugely undervalued skill. I think that people are good at acting like they're listening. And I think that when it comes to, people are thinking I'm going to say, oh, strategic visioning or, operations, and those things actually are skills and strengths. I would say is like, I'm very quick to whip up a plan, and then go execute on that plan. And prioritization and cutting through the noise with incredible focus is the other one. And so just like, I'm good at saying no, and that's a funny sounding skill, but I would say that one of my favorite business books is Essentialism.
Yes.
Yeah, killer book, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, I bring that up on the topic of saying no, is because I really believe that this is like one of the things that would unlock potential for the vast majority of people, whether you're a W-2 entrepreneur or otherwise. Stop saying yes until you stop and think about it first. About, and we're not just talking about real estate and deals. And clearly that's a key part of what my role is for the company, is like, I'm the one sitting there and looking at these deals and deciding if we're going to say yes or no. And we say primarily no. What we're talking about here though is, am I going to go and allocate the next hour to X activity? And stopping and asking the question, how does it align to what I have to achieve, and what's important and what's urgent, and figuring out what is important versus what is urgent is the daily challenge for a human. And so let alone for an entrepreneur. So I'd say that those things are actually my two big areas where I can spike in contribution to the business, is making authentic connections with people, with a foundation of active listening and, being a good partner, but then also just ruthless prioritization, man. Just like, I think ruthless is the only way to say that right. Just like saying no, saying it with compassion, and understanding that sometimes people might take that personally, but that's not because you don't like them. It's just because you have stuff, you have bigger fish to fry at that moment. You got to go take care of your family. You got to take care of your business. You got to go take care of the important stuff. Can't always go have that beer. Can't always go have that coffee. Can't always go spend that hour on Xbox, which would be way more fun. But all that stuff. So long-winded answer.
Yeah. So that is one of my favorite books. Check this out. So Greg McEwen wrote Essentialism. I've interviewed him on one of my shows and had
Oh,
cool
really?
conversation. Yeah. You're much better. You're much better at interviewing.
Oh,
No, he was good
come
too.
on.
But we had such a good time. But that book, the learning the power of, saying no is so vital. Like, cutting out things to get to the most important things, right? Every time I say yes, I'm saying no to something else.
Yes.
So what is the most important thing that you've had to say no to that was tough for you?
There's just so many that come to mind that I would put in that ranking. This is there's two I want to draw on, but I'll try to keep this brief. So the biggest one was a moment in my W-2 career, and I remember the exact phone call. I was offered a very significant promotion at a previous company I was at, bigger role, a lot more money, a lot more cash compensation, more equity, big team, all that fancy title stuff. And I was presented with that, or an offer to take a 40% cash reduction. So promotion versus cash cut. And I was also choosing to go and to do more work. This is actually the company where I ended up working 80 hours a week. And although I was saying that that was something to run away from when I got to that company eventually, that's not because I had a bad time from a learning perspective there. So in hindsight, what I said no to was a walking away from this whole, and because this theme has been recurring, I could probably draw on 5 or 6 big decision moments that are say no to the short-term gratification and the optics, very corporate way of saying how things look, how impressive. Like, do I care about a title? I really, really, really don't. Like, some people say I don't care about titles. I really don't care about titles. Like the cash comp, all that stuff is great. What matters is walking away from that in service of learning that will ultimately yield bigger long-term outcomes, big outcomes for the family and for other people. None of this stuff would have happened with our current circumstances in our business if I hadn't started with those decisions, and that decision in particular. And I remember when I was on the phone, I don't know, not every decision you can be aware of the importance of that moment, but I was sitting there literally thinking, this is a really important decision. I was like, I gotta make sure I don't mess this up. And thankfully I made the right decision at that time. As painful as it was to go through afterwards, that was very much the right decision, and a very good no, to say no to more money, more prestige, more headcount to manage and tell people for the sake of sounding good at a cocktail party, all that stuff.
Yeah. So in this interview, we've talked a lot about life and things, but let's go on the deal side. What
Cool.
kind of deals? What's a good deal for you guys? Like, what are some of the things that you guys invest in?
Yeah, so I would say that let's see, we've got 34 deals to date. More than 70%, roughly, swag number, have been large apartment deals, large apartment communities. Value add has been most of them. Starting to do a little bit more open-mindedness on development, new build stuff, even beyond multifamily. So that's been lion's share of it. Also done self-storage, like self-storage a lot. Um, and so those have been the two big commercial real estate asset classes that we have focused on. Occasionally also do some niche stuff that's non-real estate, but I would say those are still at their core in our personal portfolio. Like, we're targeting a mix that is at least half large multifamily. I believe that asset class, although everything is true about people out there saying, oh, are things overpriced? Well, yes, the answer is yes. Like every asset in the planet right now is virtually overpriced for the most part. Maybe with the exception of precious metals. But like, other than that, yes, real estate across the board is expensive right now, but I still believe the demand is surprising economists across the board. So those are the types of deals we're interested in, is like, can it cash flow in the first year? And is it something that is possible to go into with competent asset management, operations, renovations as needed, all that stuff, in a time when that's not always as simple as it used to be. Supply chain disruptions are abound. Wood and metal don't show up in the right places when people need them to. This sounds so simple, but it's a really big deal. So the people who are better at getting wood and metal where it needs to be, in whatever forms it takes, at the right buildings at the right times with the right teams and labor to actually execute and doing those renovations, those are those things that matter to us. So I would say that when all else fails, there's kind of 5 things I look for in the partners that we work with. Like, we look at track record, approach, team, comms, like how do they communicate, and then values, as corny as that sounds. I am one of those guys that believes you can at least do some behavioral interviewing stuff from best practices, and actually kind of tease out real life stories and understand how people view values and integrity and all that stuff. Because a lot of people say they have them, but then when you kind of push and poke at that, you're like, well, okay, it's okay. It's a vanity metric for that person. Really finding the team that can execute a repeatable business process, but they can get the materials and the talent and the structures around that deal to execute it.
Very cool. So as we're going through this and rounding out to the end, where can people go to learn more information about Madison Investing and maybe do a deal with you?
Yeah, we have a website. You can come to madisoninvesting.com. If you go on there, click get started, you can book a time, and we can connect and have a call. We're just going to get to know each other.
Very cool. Very cool. So, Spencer, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing so many things about the deal maker, so many things about you and the things that have helped create you become who you are today. This is the final question. If there's one thing, as your boys are watching you, your young boys are watching dad, because we became our dads in essence, right? And one day
Yeah.
your boys will become their dads. What's one characteristic that you want them to learn from you?
Curiosity. Be curious. Be curious about how things work. I think that's what unlocks most great things when it comes to new experiences, new people, new relationships. It's what makes people get along better. I don't, I wish I could quote that important quote, but it was about, it might have been an Abe Lincoln thing, but then again, the internet memes tend to give credit way too often to the wrong person. So maybe it's not an Abe Lincoln thing,
Yeah.
but if it's the quote was like, I don't like that man. I must get to know him better. And I think that curiosity is really key, because if you just scratch down, if you, instead of thinking, oh, I don't know anything about being a really good runner, instead of saying, okay, that's just who I am, why not ask, wow, I wonder how that works. Wow, I wonder how Usain Bolt runs so fast. Like whatever it might be, real estate, money, life, relationships, just get curious, man. So if the boys are listening, yeah, stop complaining, go get more curious about something.
Very cool. Spencer, thanks for coming on the show. Fellow deal makers out there, if you're working on a deal or looking for a deal, you could always head on over to thedealscout.com, fill out a quick form, maybe get you on the show. And as always, reach out to our guests, say thank you for being on the show, and find a way to do a deal with a guy like Spencer. Hope you guys are having an amazing day. We'll talk to you all on the next episode. See you guys.